The gunshot that echoed through the saloon at half-past 9 on that June evening in 1878 was not what changed Samuel Orton's life, though he was the one holding the smoking pistol. It was what he heard 30 seconds later, while the crowd still buzzed with nervous energy, and the card cheat he had wounded crawled toward the door, that split his world clean in two. Through the broken window drifted a woman's voice, clear as creek water and twice as cold, saying words that made his blood run hot with anger he had no right to feel. "I saw you, Richard. I saw you with her." Samuel holstered his weapon and moved toward that window like a man in a dream, drawn by something he could not name. The crowd parted without him asking, perhaps sensing the change in him, the sudden tension that had nothing to do with the violence he had just enacted in defense of an honest game. Outside, beneath the gas lamp that illuminated the wooden boardwalk, stood a woman in a deep green dress that matched the summer leaves back home in Missouri, and she was trembling. The man facing her was Richard Sterling, the banker's son, dressed in fine Eastern clothes that marked him as separate from the rough miners and cowboys who populated Virginia City, Nevada. Samuel knew him by reputation, knew he was engaged to be married in 3 days' time, knew the whole town was preparing for the celebration. What he had not known, until this moment, was that Richard Sterling was also a liar and a cheat of a different sort than the one bleeding on the saloon floor. "Zelda, you are being hysterical," Richard said, and his voice carried that particular tone of condescension that made Samuel's jaw tighten. "What you think you saw was perfectly innocent. Miss Caroline is a family friend, nothing more." "You were kissing her," Zelda said, and though her voice shook, it did not break. "In the hotel. I brought you those papers your father requested, and I found you in her room and you were kissing her." Samuel should have walked away. This was not his business, not his concern, not his fight. He had his own troubles, his own reasons for being in Virginia City, working as a ranch hand for the Double Circle outfit while he saved enough money to buy land of his own. He had sworn off entanglements after what happened in Kansas City, after Mary Elizabeth married the railroad man and left Samuel with nothing but a broken heart, and a determination to never let himself care that deeply again. But Zelda Grace turned then, perhaps feeling the weight of his stare, and their eyes met across the dusty street. Hers were the color of autumn honey, wide and wounded, and in them he saw something that called to the part of him he thought he had buried. Not innocence exactly, but a kind of fierce honesty that was rarer than gold in these parts. Richard noticed Samuel then, noticed the way Zelda's attention had shifted, and his face darkened. "This is a private conversation, Cowboy. Move along." Samuel stepped off the boardwalk, his boots hitting the packed earth of the street with quiet authority. He was tall, taller than Richard by 3 inches, broader through the shoulders by the kind of margin that came from hard work rather than soft living. His dark hair needed cutting, his jaw needed shaving, and his clothes marked him as exactly what Richard had called him, but there was something in his bearing that made the banker's son take an involuntary step backward. "The lady seems distressed," Samuel said quietly. "Just making sure she is all right." "The lady is my fiancé," Richard said, recovering his bluster, "and this does not concern you." "That right?" Samuel looked at Zelda, really looked at her, taking in the way she held herself despite the tears that now traced silent paths down her cheeks. She was perhaps 22 or 23, young but not a girl, with dark hair pinned up in a style that was probably fashionable but was now coming loose from its moorings. "Madam, are you all right?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I do not know," she said, and the honesty of it struck him square in the chest. "I thought I knew what my life was going to be, and now I do not know anything at all." You know that your fiancé is faithful to you, Richard said sharply. Zelda, stop this foolishness. You are embarrassing yourself, embarrassing me, embarrassing both our families. We have a wedding to attend in 3 days. Do we? She asked, and Samuel heard the steel beneath the hurt. Because the man I agreed to marry was supposed to be honorable, honest. Those were the things your father said about you, the things you said about yourself when you courted me. And I am those things, Richard insisted. You are making wild accusations based on nothing. I know what I saw. You saw what your nervous female imagination conjured up, Richard said, and Samuel felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. Miss Caroline stumbled on the stairs. I caught her, and in her gratitude she placed a friendly kiss upon my cheek. That is all. Your jealousy has transformed it into something sordid. Samuel saw the doubt flicker across Zelda's face, saw her want to believe this lie because believing it would be easier than facing the truth. He recognized that moment because he had lived it himself once, had chosen to believe Mary Elizabeth when she said the railroad man meant nothing, right up until the day she boarded the train heading east with a ring on her finger that Samuel had not given her. Miss Caroline is staying at the Imperial Hotel, Samuel asked, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. Both Richard and Zelda looked at him, startled. Richard's face went red. That is none of your business. Simple question, Samuel said. She is or she is not. She is, Zelda said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in those honey-colored eyes. Room 207. Why? Samuel touched the brim of his hat to her. Just curious, madam. Have a good evening. He turned and walked away, his mind already working through what needed to be done. Behind him, he heard Richard trying to steer Zelda toward her father's house, heard her resist, heard the argument continue in heated whispers. The Imperial Hotel was 3 blocks down Main Street, a 2-story structure that catered to visitors with money to spend. Samuel had never set foot inside it, had no reason to, but he pushed through the doors now with purpose. The clerk behind the desk looked up, his expression shifting from welcome to wariness as he took in Samuel's rough appearance. "Can I help you?" "Got a message for Miss Caroline," Samuel said smoothly. "She is in room 207, I believe. Ladies Bow asked me to deliver it personal-like." The clerk hesitated, then shrugged. "Second floor, 3rd door on the right, but it is late for calling." "Won't take but a minute," Samuel assured him, and climbed the stairs before the man could object further. He found room 207 easily enough and knocked, 3 sharp raps that sounded louder than he intended in the quiet hallway. After a moment, a woman's voice called out, "Who is it?" "Telegram, madam," Samuel lied. "Needs your signature." The door opened to reveal a blonde woman in a silk dressing gown, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face pretty in a calculated way that reminded Samuel of the saloon girls who worked the mining camps. She looked at him with interest that was not entirely proper for a woman receiving a strange man at her door after dark. "I do not recall expecting a telegram," she said, but she smiled as she said it. "My mistake, madam," Samuel said, touching his hat. "Must have the wrong room. Though I wonder if you could help me with a different matter. You are acquainted with Mr. Richard Sterling, I believe." Her expression changed, became guarded. "I know Mr. Sterling, yes. He is a business associate of my father's. Why do you ask?" "Because I need to know if he was here in your room earlier this evening," Samuel said bluntly. "If he was, and if what happened between you was more than conversation about business matters." Miss Caroline's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, anger, calculation, and finally a kind of defiant pride. "I do not see how that is any of your concern." "It is not," Samuel agreed. "But it is the concern of Miss Zelda Grace, who caught you and Mr. Sterling together and is being told she imagined the whole thing." I need to know if she imagined it or if she saw the truth." "Why do you care?" Miss Caroline asked, her eyes narrowing. "Who are you to her?" "Nobody," Samuel said honestly. "Just a man who does not like seeing women lied to by men who ought to know better." Something in his tone must have resonated with her, because Miss Caroline's shoulders sagged slightly. "Richard said she would never know. He said she was naive and trusting and would believe whatever he told her. He said after the wedding, after he had access to her father's money, we could continue our arrangement discreetly." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Samuel felt rage building in his chest, hot and righteous, but he kept his voice level. "How long has this been going on?" "6 months," Miss Caroline said, and there was bitterness in her voice now. "He promised to marry me, you see, before he met her. Before he realized that Zelda Grace came with a substantial dowry and family connections that I could never provide. So he chose her, but he wanted to keep me as well. And I was fool enough to agree because I still loved him." "Do you?" Samuel asked. "Still love him, I mean," she laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "I do not know. I loved the man I thought he was. But the man who would marry one woman while keeping another in hotel rooms paid for with his future wife's father's money, I am not sure that man is worth loving." "No, madam," Samuel said quietly. "I do not reckon he is." "What will you do with this information?" Miss Caroline asked. "Will you tell Miss Grace?" "That depends," Samuel said. "Would you be willing to tell her yourself? To tell the truth of it so she knows she is not crazy or jealous or imagining things?" Miss Caroline was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I think I would. Richard Sterling deserves to lose her, and she deserves to know what kind of man she was about to bind her life to." "Then get dressed, madam," Samuel said. "We have a visit to make." 20 minutes later, Samuel stood on the porch of the Grace family home, a fine house on the north edge of town with a white picket fence and roses growing beneath the windows. Miss Caroline stood beside him, now dressed in a respectable day gown, her face pale but determined. Samuel knocked on the door, and after a moment, it was opened by a middle-aged man with silver threading through his dark hair. "Yes," he said, looking confused at the sight of the cowboy and the strange woman on his doorstep at this hour. "Mr. Grace?" Samuel asked. "My name is Samuel Orton. I apologize for the late hour, but I need to speak with your daughter. It is regarding her upcoming marriage to Mr. Richard Sterling." The confusion on Mr. Grace's face shifted to concern. "What about the marriage? Is Richard all right?" "Richard is fine, sir," Samuel said. "But there are some things Miss Zelda needs to hear before she walks down that aisle. Things that will not wait until morning." Mr. Grace studied Samuel for a long moment, then his gaze shifted to Miss Caroline. Something in her face, some echo of the pain Zelda had shown in the street, must have convinced him, because he stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in, then. Zelda is in the parlor with her mother." The house smelled of lavender and beeswax, of comfortable wealth and careful domesticity. Samuel felt acutely aware of his dusty boots on the polished floors, the way he did not belong in this refined space. But he followed Mr. Grace through to the parlor, where Zelda sat on a velvet settee beside an older woman who could only be her mother. Zelda looked up as they entered, and Samuel saw the moment she recognized Miss Caroline. All the color drained from her face, and she stood up so quickly she nearly knocked over the small table beside her. "What is she doing here?" Zelda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "She came to tell you the truth," Samuel said gently. "To tell you that you were not wrong about what you saw tonight." Mrs. Grace looked between them all, her expression sharpening with maternal protectiveness. "What is the meaning of this? Who are you people?" "Mother, father," Zelda said, her voice stronger now. This is the woman I found in the hotel room with Richard earlier this evening. The woman he was kissing." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stone. Mr. Grace's face went dangerously red while Mrs. Grace reached out to grip her daughter's hand. Samuel remained near the door, knowing his part in this was nearly finished but unwilling to leave until he was certain Zelda would be all right. Miss Caroline stepped forward, her head held high despite the shame that must have been eating at her. "What Miss Grace says is true. Richard Sterling and I have been carrying on an intimate relationship for the past 6 months. He promised to marry me until he met your daughter and realized the financial advantages of marrying her instead. Tonight, he told me that after the wedding we could continue our relationship in secret. I agreed, God help me, because I was weak, but I cannot stand by and let him do this to her. She deserves better than a man who would treat her with such disrespect." "Get out," Mr. Grace said, his voice shaking with rage. But the rage was not directed at Miss Caroline or Samuel. "Get out and do not come near my daughter again. You have done the right thing in coming here, but I will not have you in my home a moment longer." Miss Caroline nodded, unsurprised. She looked at Zelda, and something passed between the two women, some understanding that transcended the circumstances of their meeting. "I am sorry," Miss Caroline said. "Truly I am. You were right to trust your eyes and right to question him. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." She turned and left, and Samuel started to follow, but Zelda's voice stopped him. "Wait." He turned back to find her looking at him with those honey-colored eyes that seemed to see right through to his bones. "Why did you do this?" she asked. "You do not know me. This is not your concern. Why would you go to all this trouble?" Samuel struggled to find words that would make sense when he barely understood his own motivations. "I reckon I just could not stand by and watch a woman be lied to by a man she trusted," he finally said. "Could not watch you doubt yourself and your own eyes because he was telling you that you were wrong. That seemed like a greater crime than the infidelity itself, somehow." Zelda crossed the room to stand before him, and he was struck again by her strength, by the way she carried herself even in the midst of her world falling apart. "Thank you," she said softly. "I do not know what would have happened if I had not met you tonight. I might have convinced myself I was wrong. I might have married him and spent the rest of my life wondering if I was losing my mind." "You are not losing your mind," Samuel said firmly. "You are stronger and braver than most people I have met, and you deserve a man who will treat you with the honesty and respect you are due." Something flickered in her eyes, some emotion he could not quite name, but before she could speak, Mr. Grace cleared his throat. "Mr. Orton, is it? I want to thank you as well for bringing this to our attention. I will be calling on the Sterling family first thing in the morning to inform them that the wedding is canceled. I assume we can count on your discretion in this matter." "Yes, sir," Samuel said. "I will not speak of it to anyone." "Good. Then I bid you good night." It was a dismissal, polite but firm, and Samuel accepted it with a nod. He touched the brim of his hat to the ladies and turned to go, feeling oddly empty now that his purpose had been fulfilled. He had done what needed doing, had ensured that Zelda Grace would not marry a man who would betray her before the ink dried on the marriage certificate. That should have been enough. But as he walked back through the dark streets toward the boarding house where he kept a room, he found himself thinking about those honey-colored eyes, about the strength in Zelda's voice even as she confronted the worst betrayal. He thought about the way she had looked at him, like he was something more than just a rough cowboy with dust on his boots and nothing in his pockets. He was still thinking about her when he finally fell asleep that night, and when he woke with the dawn, she was the first thing on his mind. The next 3 days were strange ones for Virginia City. The news of the canceled wedding spread through town like wildfire, carried on the tongues of servants and shopkeepers and saloon patrons. Richard Sterling left town on the morning train, his tail between his legs, while his father remained to deal with the social fallout and the business implications of his son's disgrace. Samuel heard the gossip but did not contribute to it. He went about his work at the double circle, riding fence lines and breaking horses, and doing the 1,000 small tasks that filled a ranch hand's days. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the Grace house on the north edge of town, wondering how Zelda was handling the aftermath of her broken engagement. He told himself it was none of his business. He had done what any decent man would do, had prevented a wrong from occurring, and now he should let it rest. Zelda Grace moved in different circles than he did, came from a different world. Her father was an important man in town, a mine owner with interests in several profitable claims. Samuel was just a cowboy with dreams of his own spread someday, dreams that were still years away from reality. But on the fourth day after that fateful night, as Samuel rode back into town to pick up supplies for the ranch, he saw her. Zelda stood outside the general store, her arms full of packages, struggling to maintain her grip as she tried to open the door. Without thinking, Samuel dismounted and crossed to her side, reaching past her to pull the door open. "Allow me, madam," he said. She looked up, startled, and then her face broke into a smile that hit him like a physical force. "Mr. Orton," she said, "I did not expect to see you again so soon." "Just came into town for supplies," he said, suddenly aware of how inadequate his words were, how much he wanted to say something meaningful but had no idea what. "Did not mean to intrude." "You are not intruding," she said quickly. "In fact, I was hoping I might run into you. I wanted to thank you again for what you did. My father has been singing your praises all week." "No thanks necessary," Samuel said, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. "Just did what was right." "Perhaps," Zelda said, "but most men would not have bothered. Most men would have decided it was not their concern and walked away." She paused, then added, "Would you walk with me? I have a few more errands to run and I would appreciate the company. If you have time, that is." Samuel should have said no. Should have made his excuses and ridden back to the ranch before he got any more tangled up in something that could only end badly. But instead, he heard himself saying, "I have time." They walked together through the afternoon streets of Virginia City, and Samuel found himself talking in a way he rarely did. Zelda asked him questions about his work, about where he came from, about his dreams for the future, and he answered honestly, surprised by how easy it was to open up to her. In turn, she told him about her life, about growing up as the only daughter of a wealthy mine owner, about the expectations placed upon her, and the way she had tried so hard to meet them. "I thought marrying Richard was what I was supposed to do," she said as they paused outside the milliner's shop. "He was from a good family, he was educated and refined, and my parents approved. I told myself that love would come with time, that the fact I did not feel any great passion for him was simply proof that I was being sensible rather than foolish." "And now?" Samuel asked. "Now I think perhaps I was being a coward," Zelda said. "I was choosing safety over happiness, security over truth, and I might have done it, might have married him and spent my life in a passionless union if not for his infidelity. In a strange way, Richard did me a favor. He showed me that I was settling for less than I deserved." "You do deserve more," Samuel said, and the intensity in his own voice surprised him. "You deserve someone who will be faithful to you, who will honor you, who will count himself lucky every day that you chose him." Zelda looked at him, really looked at him, and Samuel felt something shift in the air between them. "Do you believe such men exist, Mr. Orton?" "I do, madam," he said. "And please call me Samuel." "Only if you call me Zelda." she said, and there was warmth in her voice that made his heart beat faster. They continued walking, and the conversation flowed easily between them, covering everything from books to horses to their opinions on the territorial politics that dominated the newspapers. Samuel was surprised to discover that Zelda had opinions, strong ones, and was not afraid to voice them. She was well-read, articulate, and possessed a sharp wit that delighted him. When they finally parted ways outside her father's house, Samuel felt as though he had known her for years rather than days. And when she asked if he might call on her again, might come to dinner later that week, he agreed without hesitation. That dinner led to another, and then another. Samuel found himself spending every spare moment in Zelda's company, riding into town on his days off, sitting in the Grace parlor making awkward conversation with her parents while he waited for her to appear. Mr. and Mrs. Grace were wary at first, protective of their daughter after what had happened with Richard, but Samuel's sincerity was impossible to deny. "What are your intentions toward my daughter?" Mr. Grace asked one evening, cornering Samuel on the front porch while Zelda helped her mother with something in the kitchen. Samuel met the older man's eyes steadily. "Honorable ones, sir. I care for her deeply, more than I have ever cared for anyone." "But you are a ranch hand," Mr. Grace said, not unkindly. "You have no property, no established business. How do you intend to provide for her?" It was the question Samuel had been asking himself for weeks now, the fear that kept him awake at night. "I have been saving my wages," he said. "In another year, maybe 2, I will have enough to buy land of my own to start my own ranch. It would not be the life she is accustomed to, not at first, but I would work every day to build something worthy of her." Mr. Grace studied him for a long moment. "You love her?" It was not a question, but Samuel answered anyway. "Yes, sir, I do." "Does she know?" "I have not said the words yet," Samuel admitted. "Did not feel I had the right until I could offer her something more than just my feelings." "That is remarkably foolish of you," Mr. Grace said, but there was humor in his voice now. "My daughter is not a woman who needs grand gestures or material wealth. What she needs is honesty. What she deserves is a man who will love her for who she is, not for what she brings to the marriage." "If you are that man, Samuel Orton, then I suggest you tell her so before some other fellow figures it out." Samuel blinked, surprised. "You would approve of me courting her?" "I would approve of any man who makes my daughter smile the way she smiles when she talks about you," Mr. Grace said. "Any man who would risk social censure and physical danger to ensure she did not marry a scoundrel. Yes, Samuel, you have my blessing. Now go inside and stop wasting time." Samuel found Zelda in the garden behind the house, tending to her mother's roses in the fading light of evening. She looked up as he approached, and the smile that lit her face was everything beautiful in the world distilled into a single expression. "Did my father grill you mercilessly?" she asked, amusement dancing in her eyes. "He did," Samuel admitted, moving to stand beside her. "Ask me about my intentions." "And what did you tell him?" "The truth," Samuel said. "That I care for you more than I have ever cared for anyone, that I want to build a life with you if you will have me." Zelda set down her gardening shears and turned to face him fully. "That sounds remarkably like a declaration, Samuel Orton." "I suppose it is," he said, his heart pounding so hard he was certain she must hear it. "I know I have no right to ask you to wait for me, to tie yourself to a man who has nothing to offer but hard work and big dreams. But I love you, Zelda Grace. I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing under that gas lamp, refusing to let Richard Sterling convince you that you were wrong. And if you will give me the chance, I will spend every day of my life proving that I am worthy of that love." For a moment she was silent, and Samuel felt fear grip his chest. Then she stepped forward and took his hands in hers, and the warmth of her touch chased away every doubt. "Samuel," she said softly, "I do not need you to be worthy. You already are. You are honest and brave and kind, and you see me as I truly am rather than as what everyone expects me to be. I do not care if you have nothing but the clothes on your back. I love you, and that is enough." "You love me?" Samuel asked, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "I do," Zelda said, and her smile was radiant. "I fell in love with you somewhere between that first night when you stood up for me and this afternoon when you spent 20 minutes telling me about your favorite horse. I love your integrity, your gentleness, your strength. I love the way you make me laugh and the way you listen when I talk about things that matter to me. I love you, Samuel Orton, and I do not want to wait years for us to be together." "But your father said I should have something to offer you," Samuel protested. "Land, a home, something stable." "My father said you should tell me how you feel," Zelda corrected. "The rest we can figure out together. Samuel, I do not need a mansion or a fortune. I need you, just you." He kissed her then, there in the garden with the roses blooming around them and the summer stars beginning to appear overhead. It was his first kiss, her second, and it tasted like promise and hope in coming home. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Zelda wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her slender frame, and Samuel wore a new suit purchased with the last of his savings. Mr. Grace gave his daughter away with tears in his eyes, and Mrs. Grace wept openly through the entire service. The whole town turned out for the wedding, eager to see the conclusion of the romantic story that had captivated Virginia City. The scandalous broken engagement, the mysterious cowboy who rode to the rescue, the swift courtship that followed. It was the stuff of dime novels, people said, and they were not wrong. But Samuel did not care about the gossip or the romance of it all. He cared about the way Zelda looked at him as they exchanged their vows, the way her hand trembled in his, the way she said, "I do," with such conviction that there was no room for doubt. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the Grace house, and Samuel found himself shaking more hands than he could count, accepting congratulations from people he had never met. But the moment that mattered most came when Mr. Grace pulled him aside and handed him an envelope. "What is this?" Samuel asked, confused. "Open it," Mr. Grace said. Inside was a deed to 200 acres of land at the base of the Sierra Nevada mountains, prime grazing territory with water access and timber for building. Samuel stared at it, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. "I cannot accept this," he said finally. "It is too much." "It is not a gift," Mr. Grace said firmly. "It is an investment. You will pay me back from the profits of your ranch with interest. But I know you, Samuel Orton. I know you would wait years, working yourself to exhaustion, before you felt you could provide adequately for my daughter. This way, you can start building your life together now instead of putting it off. Do we have a deal?" Samuel looked at the deed, then at Mr. Grace, then over at Zelda, who was laughing at something Mrs. Grace had said. His wife. His future. His life. "We have a deal," Samuel said, and shook his father-in-law's hand. The next few months passed in a blur of activity. Samuel gave his notice at the double circle, thanking the foreman who had given him his start, but eager to begin building his own spread. He and Zelda moved into a small cabin on their land while they planned the house they would build, working together to clear ground and establish corrals and begin assembling the herd that would be the foundation of their ranch. It was hard work, harder than anything Zelda had ever done before, but she threw herself into it with enthusiasm that amazed Samuel. She learned to cook on a wood stove, to tend chickens, to help with the horses. She kept their accounts with meticulous care, managed their limited funds with the skill of someone who understood business, and never once complained about the rough conditions or the long hours. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their cabin and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about their plans and dreams. Samuel told her about the kind of ranch he wanted to build, sustainable and ethical, treating the land and animals with respect. Zelda shared her ideas about breeding programs and marketing strategies, surprising him with her sharp business mind. "I thought you were just a mine owner's daughter," Samuel teased one night, and she laughed. "I am a mine owner's daughter who paid attention when her father talked business at the dinner table," she said. "Did you think I spent all my time embroidering pillows?" "I do not know what I thought," Samuel admitted. "Only that I am grateful every day that you chose me." "I will keep choosing you," Zelda said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Every day for the rest of our lives." Their first winter was challenging. The cabin was drafty, the weather brutal, and there were moments when Samuel wondered if they had taken on more than they could handle. But they weathered it together, literally and figuratively, emerging in the spring stronger and more committed than ever. By their first anniversary, the ranch was beginning to take shape. They had a small herd of cattle, a handful of horses, and plans for expanding both. The house they were building was framed and roofed, and they hoped to move into it before the next winter. Samuel hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, and Zelda established a vegetable garden that produced enough to feed them all and sell the surplus in town. On the evening of their anniversary, Samuel rode into Virginia City to pick up a surprise he had commissioned weeks earlier. It was a ring, nothing fancy, just a simple gold band with Zelda's initials engraved inside. He had not been able to afford a ring when they married, had felt ashamed standing at the altar with nothing to give her but his heart and his promises. When he presented it to her that night, along with a bouquet of wildflowers he had picked on the ride home, Zelda cried. "It is beautiful," she said, slipping it onto her finger. "But Samuel, you did not have to do this. I have never needed a ring to know that you are committed to me." "I know," Samuel said, "but I wanted you to have something tangible. Something you can look at and remember that I will love you always, that I will never betray your trust the way he did." Zelda cupped his face in her hands, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. "I never doubt that," she said. "Not for a single moment. You have shown me what true love looks like, Samuel. Not just in grand gestures, but in 1,000 small actions every day. The way you make coffee for me in the morning, the way you listen when I talk about my ideas, the way you hold me at night like I am something precious. That is what love is, and it is more than I ever dreamed of having." They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that had only deepened over the course of their marriage. And afterward, as Zelda slept in his arms, Samuel sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the series of chances that had brought them together. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Samuel's careful management and Zelda's business acumen proved to be a winning combination, and the Orton Ranch became known throughout the territory for its quality stock and fair dealings. They expanded their holdings, hired more help, and built relationships with other ranchers and businessmen throughout Nevada. But their greatest joy came in the spring of 1881, when Zelda gave birth to their first child. Samuel paced outside their bedroom for hours while the doctor and midwife attended to his wife, terrified by every cry of pain that escaped through the walls. When the baby's first wail finally pierced the air, he nearly collapsed with relief. The midwife emerged with a smile. "You have a son, Mr. Orton, a healthy, strong boy." Samuel entered the bedroom to find Zelda propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as he approached, and the love in her eyes was overwhelming. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Samuel sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had dark hair like his own and what might be Zelda's eyes, though it was hard to tell. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, and Samuel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "What should we name him?" Zelda asked. "I was thinking James," Samuel said. "After your father, if that is all right with you." Zelda smiled. "James Orton, I like it. James Henry Orton after both our fathers." Little James was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Margaret, called Maggie, who had her mother's honey-colored eyes and her father's stubborn streak. And 3 years after that came another son, Thomas, who was the spitting image of his grandfather Grace and just as sharp with numbers. The house they had built grew along with their family, expanding to accommodate the chaos and joy of raising children. Samuel taught his sons to ride and rope, to treat the land with respect, to always keep their word. Zelda taught all her children to read and cipher, to think critically, to understand that strength came in many forms. On summer evenings, the family would gather on the wide porch of their home, and Samuel would tell stories about the old days, about the night he met their mother outside a saloon in Virginia City. The children never tired of hearing how their father had ridden to their mother's rescue, how he had tracked down the truth and brought it to light. "Were you scared?" James asked one night when he was about 10 years old, "when you had to confront that lady and ask her about Father's lies?" "About Richard's lies, you mean," Samuel corrected gently. "And yes, I was scared. But sometimes you have to be brave even when you are frightened, especially when something important is at stake." "Mother was important," Maggie said, as if this were obvious. "Your mother is the most important thing in my world," Samuel agreed, reaching over to take Zelda's hand. "Along with you 3 rascals." "Tell us about the wedding," Thomas begged, even though he had heard the story 100 times. Zelda laughed and obliged, describing the simple ceremony, the way the whole town had turned out, the reception at her parents' house. She told them about the land deed their grandfather had given as a wedding gift, about the cabin where they had lived that first year, about the struggles and triumphs of building the ranch. As the children grew older, they each found their own paths. James took to ranching like he was born to it, working alongside Samuel and eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations. Maggie surprised everyone by developing a talent for breeding horses, building a program that became renowned throughout the territory. Thomas, with his head for numbers, managed the business side of things, ensuring the ranch remained profitable even as the frontier began to give way to civilization. But through it all, the center of the family remained the love between Samuel and Zelda. It was a love that had been tested by hardship and strengthened by time, a love built on honesty and respect and genuine affection. They still sat together on the porch in the evenings, still talked about their dreams and plans, still looked at each other with the same wonder they had felt in those early days. Mr. and Mrs. Grace remained active parts of their lives until they passed, first Mrs. Grace in 1890, and then Mr. Grace 2 years later. Samuel mourned the loss of the man who had given him his chance, who had seen past the rough exterior to the honorable heart beneath. At the funeral, he stood with his arm around Zelda as she wept, and remembered the night he had promised her father that he would spend every day earning her love. "You made good on that promise," Zelda said later, as if reading his thoughts. "He knew how happy we were. He told me so many times." As the 19th century drew to a close, Samuel and Zelda found themselves entering a new phase of life. James married a sweet girl from Virginia City and brought her to live on the ranch, in a house built not far from the main house. Maggie married a horse trainer who shared her passion, and they established their own spread in California, though they visited often. Thomas married last, to a schoolteacher who had come west seeking adventure, and they made their home in town while still managing the ranch's business affairs. And then came the grandchildren, a whole new generation to spoil and teach and love. Samuel and Zelda embraced their roles as grandparents with enthusiasm, watching their legacy expand in ways they had never imagined. One evening in the summer of 1898, Samuel and Zelda sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times over the past 20 years. They were older now, their hair gray, their bodies marked by years of hard work and good living. But the love between them was as strong as ever, perhaps stronger, tempered by time and deepened by shared experience. "You ever think about that night?" Zelda asked suddenly. "The night we met, all the time," Samuel admitted. "I think about how close you came to marrying Richard Sterling, how different both our lives would have been if I had not heard you arguing with him outside that saloon." "I think fate brought us together," Zelda said. "I think we were always meant to find each other one way or another." "Maybe," Samuel said, "or maybe we just got lucky." "Whatever it was, I am grateful for it," Zelda said. "For you, for this life we have built together, I would not change a single moment of it." Samuel pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. "Neither would I," he said. "You are my home, Zelda Orton. You always have been." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Around them, their ranch sprawled out in all directions, a testament to years of hard work and careful planning. In the distance, they could hear the laughter of their grandchildren playing near the creek, the sound carrying clearly in the evening air. This was the life they had built together, brick by brick and day by day. This was the legacy they would leave behind when their time came. Not just the land or the cattle or the thriving business, but the love that had sustained them through every challenge, every joy, every ordinary moment that made up a life well lived. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Nevada sky, Samuel helped Zelda to her feet and they walked together into their house, hand in hand, just as they had been from the very beginning. Behind them, the door closed on another perfect day, and ahead of them stretched all the tomorrows yet to come, each one a gift they would face together. The cowboy who had been nothing more than a ranch hand with dreams had built an empire. The woman who had nearly married the wrong man had found her true partner. Together, they had created something that would endure long after they were gone, a love story that their grandchildren would tell to their own grandchildren someday, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of courage and a willingness to stand up for what is right. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the wealth they had accumulated or the land they had claimed, but the love they had nurtured and the family they had raised, and the knowledge that they had lived their lives with honor and integrity and deep, abiding affection for one another. It was more than enough. It was everything,